Okay, I think. Well, the doors are shut, so I feel like that's when we can start. So, hello everyone, good morning. No, it's not nearly morning, but thank you for taking the time to join me today. We'll see, I will probably not go for a full hour, hooray, you can go to lunch early. Probably will go for about 45 minutes. Today I'm going to talk to you about AI security, and I know that I roll my eyes when people talk about AI because everyone's talking about it to death at the moment. You're a bit like, oh my God, more AI, okay, cool. Oh, that's how I feel. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is kind of a little bit the opposite of that. And you'll see what I mean as we go along. So to start with, we'll just do an introduction. We'll talk a little bit about understanding AI architecture in a security context. We'll talk about a bit about AI attacks. We'll also talk about the threat landscape. I love talking about threat landscape. It's super fun. And then some best practices. It's probably not what you think. The spoiler is that we don't have any really cool, exciting tools to secure AI. That's the spoiler. Is that next door? Or is it that my hair on this? I think it's next door. I was like, what's that noise? Anyway, who am I? This was a picture. Look, I went to see the Northern Lights like 3 nights ago. So I'm a cloud security advocate at Microsoft. I actually live in Australia. The reason I was doing tourist things up in the Arctic Circle for the last couple of days is because coming from Australia to Oslo is a really long way for 2 days of conference, so I try to do some touristy things as well. I'm a dog mom. This is probably one of the only presentations where I have not put pictures of my dogs in recently, but if you want to see dog pictures, just let me know. I've worked in security since before it was cool. That's what I say anyway. Certainly security wasn't cool when I started in it because I ended up in it accidentally, and I was really upset I'd been put in security because I was like, oh my God, the security people, I don't like them. Whereas of course now everybody wants to be in security because it became cool. So let's have a look at kind of the AI thing. I love these stats. They're very, very cool. The pace at which we're adopting technology is insane. So if you look at smartphones, it took about 15 years to get to 100 million users, but that was 16 years ago. The internet took about 7 years, Instagram took 2.5 years, TikTok took 9 months, and ChatGPT took 2 months. So the actual pace at which we're adopting new technology is getting insanely quick. Anyone here not use ChatGPT? No, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Not. So, and of course, this presents a massive challenge from a security perspective because, of course, in security, we've always tried to assess different technologies, understand the risks, etc. And that's really difficult when we're getting so many users of new technologies so quickly nowadays. Now, there are 2 bits to AI security, and I'm only talking about one of them today. So the first one is the security of AI. So Bill, how do you actually secure AI? So if you're building an AI-enabled application, I'm very deliberately using the phrase AI-enabled application, and I'll come back to why later. And then we have using AI for security. Now, AI for security, that's a talk that's maybe in the room next door or maybe along, where George Coldham, who is a colleague of mine, is talking about Security Copilot. And there are obviously lots of tools out there that are helping do security better with AI, but that's not what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about this securing AI and how you build AI things. So there's 2 different issues here. So yeah, as I said, that's what I'm doing. So hopefully that's what you're expecting. If not, I will not be insulted if you want to run out and go to George's talk. God, these transitions are nice. So full disclosure, I don't normally get nice slide designers to do my slides. It just so happened I was working with them for something else, and they very kindly did my NDC slides as well, and they're just really nice. And I'm just like, anyway. what is generative AI? If you don't know, now I know there's probably a mixture in here of people who are more, would consider themselves more developer-y and maybe more security folks. So this is just a level set for everybody. I think on the developer side, you probably do know more of this, and maybe the security people not so much. Well, that's what I've seen in my experience so far. So for generative AI, it is using natural language, it generates new content, and it allows you to personalize things, and it talks to you. Now, it doesn't talk to you, and it isn't that intelligent, which I'll talk about in a second, but obviously traditional AI was just looking at lots of different patterns, and we could use it to see patterns in things, but it wasn't very personable, and you needed to know how to interact with it. Whereas, of course, generative AI is much, much, much more accessible, hence why we've seen that massive uptake in use with ChatGPT. So just to go into it a little bit more, because I love this, I'm going to stand back so I can use my laser. Traditional AI it can go through massive amounts of data, and it can look for patterns and problems, but it can't really, like I said, talk to people. Whereas generative AI actually can understand language, it can summarize things. At a very high level, and if there's any AI expert people in the room, I realize this is a horrible high-level summary, but generative AI is not thinking. It basically is trained on absolutely huge amounts of data, if you didn't know this already. It's trained on huge amounts of language, and when you put in a word, based on all the training it's had on the language, it will guess the next word. It's not thinking as such, but of course it does look very much like it is talking to you. And of course, things, and there we have OpenAI, Meta, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just important to understand the difference. So I'm going to talk about generative AI. Is it safe? This is the question that all security people are asking. This is what all security professionals, whenever we have new technology, the first thing security people will say is, is it safe? Is it secure? By the way, actually, just out of interest, who in here would consider themselves more developer, more of a dev than a security person? Pretty much most of you. Anyone security? Go security? Oh, yay. Okay, maybe 2/3. Okay. So if you're a security person, if the business comes to you and they have a new technology, no matter what it is, the first thing you're going to say is, well, is it secure? What does it do? How does it handle data? And of course, as with any other new technology, that's what security people are asking about generative AI. The main fears that we generally have in security are, unsurprisingly, data loss and privacy issues, unwanted behaviors, telling people the wrong thing, possibly stealing people's IP from places, of course, people attacking it, and then, any other risks and abuse there. So these are the main things, but you may notice, probably aside from this one, which is quite specific, I guess, to AI, these common fears are exactly the same as any other technology. There's nothing new here. This is something I really desperately want to communicate to everybody. There is really not a huge amount of difference. It's just that this is a technology that has come along very, very quickly in comparison with new technologies in the past, and that's what we need to bear in mind. So in terms of pain points then, this is kind of a bit of a guesstimate because we're in very early days, and I'll caveat everything I'm saying today with the fact that it's changing so quickly, what I tell you today. Security and AI are both very quick, very fast evolving fields. And of course, this could change very quickly. But in general, your pain points, first of all, is integration. So when we have a new technology, it's not going to exist by itself. It's going to be integrated into something. Now, normally, whenever integration in general is often a place where we see a lot of security issues. If things don't talk to things in a secure manner, if you pull a random library that you've never seen from somewhere, this is where we see a lot of issues. And I anticipate, this is Sarah's personal opinion, not Microsoft's or anybody else, but I personally foresee most of our AI-enabled problems coming around this integration piece, at least initially, whilst people start to build things and they just don't build them very securely. But that's the same with any application. Secondly, there's the data and privacy side of things, of course, but this isn't new either. This is what
You can tell it's like a bit of a soapbox for me. We haven't been doing, for the security folks in here, who in here, do you do data classification and labeling well in your organization? Fess up. Yes? Anyone want to raise their hand and say, yes, they do? I'll do it that way round. Okay, yeah, exactly. So, although we're talking about data and privacy being a concern for AI, in fact, we've never been doing it very well, and the adoption of AI is just bringing it into focus. It's not that AI is inherently doing anything worse, because if you aren't classifying and protecting your data anyway, just throwing some AI in the mix isn't better or worse. And I think that's something really important, that a lot of this focus on AI is just thinking about AI as a security problem is just bringing into focus the things that we haven't been doing properly. Supply chain, well, of course, that's not just an issue for AI. Any application has a supply chain. We've been talking about SBOM for a long time. Shout out to GitHub Advanced Security. There's Joseph from GitHub there. And, there are tools that help you with dependency management, not just GitHub, but I'm going to shout out GitHub because GitHub in the house, and so I have to. But did you know it's something like 80% of code usually comes from elsewhere in applications. It's like a really high percent. So, if you're pulling random libraries and random bits of code and you don't know where it came from to build your application, that's potentially a security problem, whether it's AI or not. And then this one's really interesting, though. This is an AI-specific one, this trusted AI. So there's a book, I'll link to it at the end in my interesting resources. I am not on commission from them, but there's a book that was written by a couple of researchers called Ram and Hiram. It's very, very accessible. It's called Not with a Bug, but with a Sticker. It's a very easy read, accessible AI attack book about the history of AI attacks and research. And they tell a story in there of some researchers who were trying to demonstrate how much people trust AI. So they got a robot, and it was a group of people in a room, and with this robot, they basically said to them, hey, we're going to put you in this room, just wait for us, we're going to come back, but if there's a fire alarm, the robot is going to lead you to safety. So if you hear a fire alarm, trust the robot. And everyone's like, okay, sure. And then they made the robot deliberately do stupid things like bash into walls and give them incorrect information. And they were doing everything to kind of tell people that you really shouldn't trust this robot. And then the fire alarm went off. And as the fire alarm went off, everyone started following the robot. And it went straight past a fire exit, and people still followed it. Now, obviously, it wasn't a real fire and everybody was fine, but the point of the experiment was that there's something about AI, at least at the moment, that makes us trust it way more than we should. And in fact, on that, talking about alarms, I don't know if everyone knows, there's going to be a test of the Norwegian emergency system at 12, so I'll just stop and let that happen when it does. And so they found that people blindly trusted AI, and actually it shows that before some of the big major breaches we had, maybe in about 2013, 2014, when we had those large-scale breaches in Walmart and Equifax, things like that in the US that affected millions of people, that people did trust IT systems in general a lot more than they do now. So what's a bit sad about that is, will it be that we have to have some kind of big AI-related breach for people to become more mistrustful? But certainly, people trust AI way more than they should, and I think it's because it seems so personable and it talks to us. And I think we will end up, again, personal opinion, I think we're going to end up having maybe AI trustworthiness training, a little bit like phishing training, that we'll have to learn to question AI, but we'll see. And then last of all, of course, we've got unknowns. We don't know what we don't know. It's a new technology. There will be things that there's things like AI hallucinations. That's a very specific problem to AI. Is it a security risk? I'd say not from what I've seen at the moment, but it could indeed be. So we also have to keep an open mind about some of these pain points. So next up, let's look at AI architecture in a security context. Now, this is sort of quite high level and basic, and the reason for that is because we want to relate it to security concepts. And particularly if you're a dev in here, and seeing as about, I'm going to say 2/3 of you are, if you're getting some pushback from your security team, we want to keep it nice and simple in a security context so you can explain it to them so they might let you do things. Because I will apologize on behalf of security. I know that we're notorious for saying no and not letting you do things, and often that is because they don't understand. So hopefully some of this stuff will help. So these are kind of the layers that we have put together. This is all Microsoft terminology, but this is what we use in our responsible AI stuff. I would maybe have picked some different names for these layers, but we'll go with it. So I'm going to start at the bottom. So the platform layer. This is where your infrastructure is, of course. So this is where your compute is. This is where the base models sit after they've been trained, and the majority of you will not be building an AI platform. This is a lot of money, a lot of compute, and very few companies, organizations realistically will run their own AI platform. You'll be consuming some third parties like Microsoft or whoever, but it should be Microsoft, of course. But and so that's where your models sit, your training data, etc., and that compute infrastructure. In the middle here, now this depends on what you're doing. We have what we call the application layer. So if you were, I've got to throw it out here. If you were using like a Microsoft Copilot, we take care of that application layer because it's kind of more of a platform as a software as a service thing. But this is where, as a dev, you might be building that on that application layer. So this is where we care about your plugins, your prompt engineering, etc. And where potentially security issues, if you don't build things properly and talk down to that platform layer correctly, which I'll talk about later, where there might start to be issues. And then up at this AI usage layer, that's basically your inputs and your outputs. So this is where we would need to, from a security perspective, control who can put things into the model, into the application, and how those outputs come out. So probably no matter what you're doing, this layer is largely your problem as an end user, and the platform will probably not be your problem. An application, it probably depends on exactly what you're doing. So, like I said, I'll talk about it a little bit more later. And just to give you a bit more of a breakdown of kind of what's there, I know it's still high level, but of course we have your infrastructure, these security layers at the infrastructure layer, deep safety system, the actual models all sit down here at platform. I just like doing this with the laser. So apologies if this is making anyone feel sick. And then we've got our memory audit, grounding, content filters. So you may or may not be doing this. And then at the top, your prompts and your prompt responses, just to kind of give you an idea. Now, this is something where we have released this in the last couple of months at Microsoft, and I love it, and I'm so glad we did. I will say you can replace Microsoft here with any other third-party cloud provider. Obviously, I know you're all using Microsoft, so that's fine, but if you happen to not. But the idea here is shared responsibility model. Is everyone familiar with the concept of shared responsibility? Pretty much everyone's nodding, which is good. But we have released a AI-specific one because we were getting AI-specific questions, which is totally reasonable. And shared responsibility is more than just security. It's actually kind of the whole piece on who does what in your platform. But obviously, this is a security talk, so I'm going to talk about that. So you can see here, don't take this analogy too far, but we kind of liken sort of doing the whole thing yourself and bring your own model to an IaaS. Building on top of an AI platform, obviously the Microsoft is Azure OpenAI, is more like a PaaS, and then using a Copilot where you're really just interacting up here and we've built the rest of it. There we go. Oh, look, even my phone does it. It works, yeah. Yeah, do we trust it? Do we trust it? That's the question. And we're good, okay. Congratulations, Norway, your disaster system works. That is a first to have a talk interrupted by an emergency alert. I love it. Someone actually tweeted me to tell me. It was very sweet. Where was I? Yes. So here with your SAS, your Copilot, you see we do most of it. So the nice thing here is it's very, very clear who does what. And of course, the reason this is important is because if there's a gap in understanding of who does what in security controls, you can end up with a gap, and then gaps in security controls lead to potential issues. But someone's phone is slow. You're hacking back. Oh, okay, fine. Cool. So I think this is really handy. Again, you can replace this with any other. I think this is really handy to help throw at your security teams if they're a little bit nervous about all of this. But I really like platform application and usage for breaking this down in simple terms where your security controls sit. So let's have a look at a little bit of a brief history of AI attacks, going back a bit. Now, that book I talked about before, and there's a link to it at the end, that has an amazing write-up of some really cool experiments that have been done. But I'll throw out here this classic one, which is Panda versus gibbon, where you can see this picture here is a panda, and the model has said this is a 57.7% confidence, it's a panda. They added some noise. Now, this noise is imperceptible to the human eye. They've added that, and now the model thinks it's a gibbon with 99.3% confidence. And again, that is imperceptible to the human eye, but the model has seen the difference in the image, and it's now been like, oh, it's a gibbon. And that's your classic manipulation of an AI model. We'd call that, like, would that be poisoning? Probably. Here we've got, this is a way of breaking it down, all these different attacks in terms of where they sit at the different layers. I've got another slide on this a little bit later, but so we can see here a lot of what I call the cool AI attacks that have had more probably press, sit down here at the platform layer. You can see there's kind of an overwhelming majority here. Now, that's a good thing in terms of that means that basically it's more of a Microsoft problem or your platform provider's problem than yours. And then when we start to get up into here, you'll notice that quite a lot of these we have known and loved. Software vulnerabilities. Poisoning and evasion, depends how you build this stuff. And up at the top here, we do have the jailbreak, which jailbreaking is the one that's probably had the most press of everything. People use the terms a little bit inconsistently, but jailbreaking is when you essentially trick the model into doing different things. You can do gaslighting. I've seen some amazing ones. We have an AI red team in Microsoft, and their job is to try and break all our AI stuff. It's so cool, the stuff they do. Sadly, only they are allowed to talk about it on stage, and I am not, which makes me really sad. But they do things, I've seen them actually gaslight an AI model. It's so interesting. And yeah, so that's the kind of where they all sit, just roughly anyway, to give you an idea. So one of my favorite bits, the AI security threat landscape. Why is that slide there again? We'll ignore that. That slide should not be there again. But anyway, so again, another breakdown a little bit more. I like this one a little bit more just to show you where it sits. So essentially, the main things we're concerned about at this platform layer is this fundamental model and training data. So poisoning the training data, the model theft, and model poisoning. Now, again, as I said, typically when you're building things, you wouldn't need to worry about that. That would be your service provider. Having said that, for the security people in the room, you're probably thinking, she's saying just trust us, which is true, we are. But what we say with any consumption of a cloud service is trust but verify. So although we're basically saying you need to trust us as the provider to do the right thing, we have loads and loads of third-party assessments that you can go and look at. As a dev, you're probably not going to do this. You're probably like, oh my God. But this is a security person thing to do. And we have lots of different any decent cloud provider will have like third-party audits and stuff that prove we do what we say we do to keep all this stuff secure. And you should check that to make sure it's doing what's acceptable to your organization. Also, you can't come and pen test this yourself. Occasionally we get asked, can we come and pen test like your platform? And we're like, no, you can't. Then at the application layer, you can see this is potentially where things can start to go wrong, as in for you as an end user. You could start, if you don't build things correctly, you could be vulnerable to a data leak, if you don't do your plugins right. Also prompt injection as well. This is the kind of stuff that we need to start to worry about. Now, again, if you're using a Copilot, we would take care of that, but if you're starting to build things, these are the things you need to be mindful of, specifically for generative AI. And then at the top, of course, as I said, the jailbreaking, sensitive information disclosure, and of course, shadow IT, because let's face it, who in here has used, and come on, fess up to me, I promise I won't tell, who in here has used some kind of random AI thing on the internet and possibly put some data into it from your work? Yes, well done, sir. Someone's like this. I've got a friend who's a therapist who said she was using ChatGPT to write up her notes, and I was like, please do not do that. And she's like, oh, I don't put the names in, and I'm like, okay. The public version of ChatGPT, I'm not sure about that. And then, of course, we've got all of the insider risk, this over-reliance piece, which, of course, everyone's talking about, and how do we overly trust AI? It's tricky. Now, this is the busiest slide I think I have, but I kind of love it. Don't stress too much. I'm only going to cover some of it. Now, this is like all of the threat modeling scenarios that we think about in Microsoft land at the moment. And the ones I'm going to ask you, there are a lot of boxes here, I know, but the ones I'm going to ask you to pay attention to are these ones in red to start with. Now, these ones are the ones that Microsoft has as part of our bug bounty for AI. We only recently released a bug bounty for AI about 2 months ago. The MSRC, if you're not familiar with that acronym, is the Microsoft Security Response Center. So they're the people who handle all our bug bounties. So if anyone finds a bug that they think, or if you're a budding security researcher, like send it to the bug bounty program. We do have one. Apparently, I talked to a lot of people and they're like, Microsoft has a bug bounty? And I'm like, yeah, of course we do. Like, we'd rather you told us about it and we gave you some money, come on, than someone does something crazy with it. You can see, so we've actually now got a whole AI thing here. You'll notice, though, that most of these red boxes kind of sit down here at the platform layer. And we've got a little bit up at this application layer here, too. Which again is what I was saying, like these really interesting, creative AI-specific attacks sort of sit down here. But if anyone's a budding AI researcher and you can find anything like this in our stuff, please tell us about it. And then the other one I want to pay attention to is this common cyber threats, these gray boxes. Now you notice there is a lot of them around here, and there's a few here and a couple here. These are your typical cyber threats, the threats that we get no matter what kind of information system we're talking about. Now those typical threats are actually, you can see this is the stuff that you need to care about. We have way more gray up here. So things like data loss, compromised endpoints, compromised identity, the supply chain. You can see the point I'm making over and over again here is that the controls to keep generally AI safe at the moment, pretty much it's everything that we've already been doing. It's just we're not doing it. We've never historically been doing it very well, and AI is just bringing that more into focus. So, you know, if you take one thing away from this talk, that is it. Like, do all the basics right, and we'll be good. We do security. There is research that shows that if we did security hygiene correctly, so by hygiene, I mean things like using MFA, doing secure coding practices, you know, using secure libraries. If everybody did that perfectly, and I know that's very difficult to do in real life, but if everyone did that sort of stuff perfectly, the research shows that something like 90 to 95% of breaches wouldn't happen, which is insane. But I also know that security hygiene is actually very difficult to do. But what I don't want people to do, and this is why this is kind of my anti-AI talk to a point, is that AI is really cool, and you should be worried about these attacks, but honestly, no attacker is going to spend time, say, poisoning a model
if you're not like, if they can just get into a compromised endpoint where you've done no patching and get in that way, like they're not going to spend time doing this. It's not worth their time. And like threat actors, attackers, they're not super proud of their craft. They're not like, I must do this elaborate attack that will take me 3 weeks when you've left, you've got a dodgy library that they can just jump in on. So doing these basics right is by far and away the best thing we can do. And you know what? I've totally gone through my slides the wrong way, but we'll do it anyway. So you can see here another way of putting these security controls in is, again, start down here at the platform layer. So we restrict the model access to data. We do that internally in Microsoft. All of the models are immutable after they've been trained. We don't let anybody or anything really get at them, not to change them anyway. And then we also have metacognition and other things in here. At the application layer, depending on who's doing this, we'd recommend, things need to be labeled, sensitivity labeling, and also your data security around, is it sensitive in terms of privacy and things like that. We've got meta prompts and application security controls, like standard AppSec, like this is the stuff we still need to do. And then up at this top layer, I know I'm not done all of them here, we have identity security. So control who actually can access the application. If someone isn't needing to use the application, they shouldn't have access to it. It's the principle of least privilege, which is a very, very, very old security thing. And then, of course, we have our content filter, and ideally, we'd want a CASB as well here. That's not a new tool. It's a cloud access security broker. Basically stops data going in and out, if you're unfamiliar with what that tool is. As I said, I do not do my slides in the right order. I've already talked about this because I always do this. I get ahead of myself. But as I was saying, this comes from the Microsoft security research that we do every year. It's called the Digital Defense Report. It's a really cool read. It's not Microsoft specific, but we have all these research teams that do really cool things. So go and look at it. And you can see here, as I said, 98% of attacks would be stopped if we did some of these really basic things. Not everything. We do have these 1% outlier attacks, but attackers go for the easy stuff. They're not going to spend ages doing things, so bear that in mind. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about in this section was around principles for AI security. Now, I'm talking about this from Microsoft, but you should ask your if you're not using Microsoft, the same principles apply. Go and ask these whoever's providing your AI platform these questions. So, of course, if you've seen anything about Microsoft's AI, this is something that's been around a while now. We don't train our models on customer data. The models are trained down at that platform layer. Your data sits at the application layer in your tenant. And so, although we will call down to the model and it may sort of use some as part. God, I can't talk today. Your application can call down to the OpenAI model. The model may use some of the data to provide an answer back. It's never actually going down into that immutable bit below. That's a terrible explanation, I know. I should draw some pictures. But we don't do that. And whatever cloud provider you're using, you should make sure that they're doing the same for you, doing the same sort of thing as well. We also do this secure by design. This is what we do for everything. Basically, whenever we build something, it's really rigorously tested. We use loads of SDL. Did you know Microsoft was one of the first companies to do an SDL, like a secure development lifecycle, like 25 years ago? I have a colleague, he's worked at Microsoft for 30 years, and I laugh because I tell him he's worked at Microsoft since I was like 5, because I like to wind people up. And he was actually one of the people who first wrote this, but we've spent a lot of time doing this. And then lastly, now this one's really important, and this is probably the most important thing on here. We say stuff is secure by intention and in practice. We don't say secure by default. Now, secure by default is a phrase that you hear a lot from people. And the reason we don't use secure by default is because I think that the phrase secure by default suggests that you don't have to do anything, that you use the OpenAI service, you build any old application on top of it, and it's just
fine. And that's not right. We do secure by default. If you look at, this is a tangent that I won't go off on, but if you want to look at some cool secure by default stuff, and I got to call out Microsoft things, you should look at the transition from Windows 10 to Windows 11 and all the security requirements we turned on by default. It's really cool. But for an operating system where there are less variables, we can do that. For something where people are building their own stuff, we can't turn everything on by default, but we can make it really easy for you to do the right thing. So that's why we say secure by intent, to kind of hopefully allow people to realize they do need to do the right thing as well. Okay, so let's get on to, I've kind of talked about some of the things you should be doing, but let's talk about what you should be doing and some best practices. Essentially, so software supply chain security. If you're building an application, know where your stuff is coming from. Use your developer security stuff. Nothing new. OWASP, secure coding, talking to things in don't be talking to things in Telnet or TLS 1.0. Don't be using deprecated things. The good thing about AI applications is you should be theoretically building net new. So you don't have the same kind of tech debt. So you have no excuse. I don't want to see TLS 1.0 in anybody's stuff. You've got no excuse. Operational security, again, this is probably for the security folks in the room. You should be monitoring whatever people build. We should be logging things. It should be going into, it shouldn't be a massive black hole. And again, we do find that security operations, when you're building new things, sometimes people don't integrate it into whatever security operations function you have. And then if something goes wrong, people don't know, or they find out too late, and then more damage is done. Identity and access management, again, please don't be using some weird little identity store that you've just created, like some little terrible database. Please be using some kind of modern identity provider. Obviously, I'm going to be use Entra. I know it's called Entra ID now, not Azure AD. I see some people laughing and shaking their heads. I know, but it's got a new name. We love it. Or be using any other identity store. Don't be using some kind of little random database. And then data security. Now, this one I think is probably the most neglected of all, in my opinions, data security, because I don't think very few organizations have ever done this right. So here's a good chance for you to do it, because this will benefit your entire organization. Data should be labeled with some kind of classification. Now, I'm not expecting anybody to go and manually label all your data. That's just not going to happen. But there are tools out there, Microsoft and others, that will go through and label your data automatically, depending on what certain specifications that you give the data. So say it looks like it has a credit card number, they'll make it highly sensitive, etc. Because I think honestly, we talk about all of these bits that attackers are going to break the platform, they're going to break the application, but we forget. I think we lose sight often that attackers usually are trying to get to data, because the data either has value or they can lock it up and then ransom you for it. This is the thing of value. And what we do is often we put controls around all the other bits and we just leave the data sitting there, when in fact there are tools and things we can do to protect the data now too. If you haven't looked at data security tooling, just as an aside, if you haven't looked at data security tooling for the last couple of years, it used to be terrible. Now, I used to work in a previous job. We used to have a data security platform, and if you would attach a sensitive document to an email, when you sent the email, it would pop up and say, "Oh, you cannot send this. This is sensitive. I'm not going to let you." And the way to get around that was to zip the file, and then it would be like, "Oh, okay, you can go," which is terrible. Modern stuff is much smarter because I've played around with it. It's so good. If it's configured properly, doesn't let you email, doesn't let you put on a USB, doesn't let you record the screen. I was actually doing a presentation a couple of months ago, and I was trying to record a demo of this technology, and I recorded the whole demo and then watched it, and the whole screen's blank because it's a protected document and it doesn't let you do that. And I was like, brilliant. I sent it to my colleague. I didn't even realize my colleague actually was like, "Do you know you've just sent me 15 minutes of blank screen?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, sorry." It did its job though. So, this is, we've got to like do secure development stuff. So, some of the things that we recommend here, I've pretty much talked about all of this, is that we've got to look at the whole life cycle as well. But like I said, an AI-enabled application, just think of this as an application. That's all it is. It's an application that happens to have some AI in it. And so fundamentally, what we're looking at doing, at least at the moment, is still the same kind of stuff as we would for any kind of secure development. However, a couple of bits that you might want to look at is adversarial testing. I love that phrase. I mean, pen testing, red teaming. There are AI-specific things that you can do here. Like attacking the prompts, etc. As I said, we have a really cool red team in Microsoft that do some very cool things on our internal platforms. And validating prompts. Obviously, not letting the AI thing go and access everything. It shouldn't be able to access everything in your environment. We would say exactly the same thing for any other technology. It shouldn't just be like a flat thing where it can access everything. And of course, your user input, people should only be able to access it that need to. And of course, I was already talking about security operations. You should be logging as well and putting that somewhere. We should have users report issues. Look, there's nothing new here. If you found that there's some shadow IT going on and there's some generative AI things happening that shouldn't be, you should be blocking access. And of course, sensitive information shouldn't be accessed by a system. But you can't block access to sensitive information until you've labeled it. So this is why it comes back to this whole, honestly, I feel like my hope is that if there's one positive thing that comes out of this AI revolution, is that people will realize that data security is really important and need to go and do it properly. I hope. That's what I hope, because so few people do it properly. I'm not going to go over this again, but like a recap on, this is, it says SaaS Copilot, but essentially here are all your security controls kind of at the different layers. So this is kind of where all the different bits sit, and the kind of controls we have at the Copilot level. The reason we call out Copilot, of course, is for a lot of folks, if you're a Microsoft shop, Copilot's probably where you're going to start, some kind of Copilot. So you can see we're doing most of the stuff here if we hark back to the shared responsibility model. And here are the things where you would need to do things. So as we said, user training, acceptable use policy, restricting who gets access to it, etc. Also, we have a cool, and again, you don't need to be using Microsoft stuff to do this, but we did release last year a risk assessment framework. So it actually lets you go and look. It's actually a nice structured way of assessing your AI security risk. So again, if you've got skeptical security teams that are really skeptical about the whole AI thing, this isn't a Microsoft-specific thing. It's just been released by our research team, so I would go and have a look at it as well. It has a lot of security. It shows all the different security controls that should be in there, and there's a whole white paper that I'll link to at the end. But I just wanted to mention that one too because I think it's quite important. And then the very last thing I wanted to cover off, because this is going to be important, probably more so for the security side of the house, but as a dev, I think it's worth being aware of. There are some standards coming in, and what that means is there's going to be rules around what you can and can't do. So they're not here yet. There have been a lot of draft standards. There's something like 21, 22, 23 of them coming that were created. The two big ones, of course, are the ones done by NIST, so that's North America, and then the EU is doing the Artificial Intelligence Act. Now, neither of them are in force yet, and in typical North America European differences, the North American one you opt into, and the European one is going to be mandatory. So there's a bit of debate. Like, you can go online and read the drafts. It is public. There's a bit of debate as to, particularly the European one, this Artificial Intelligence Act, how far-reaching it will be. Will it be, obviously when GDPR came in years ago, that affected kind of the whole world because European Union citizens are all over the world. This is similar in that it affects systems that are, the intention is that it's going to apply to all systems that process and handle data from European Union citizens, but it is, at least at the moment, much more high level. So it's not as prescriptive as GDPR. So if it will have quite the same effect, I'm not sure it will, but we'll have to wait and see. See, they called it the Brussels effect, so we'll see what happens when this actually comes into force. The bits that I've read of it, it's extremely high level. It just says, if you have a sensitive AI system, AI application, you must protect it. Like, it's not any more prescriptive than that. And I think that's just because, again, it's so new. Even policymakers are struggling to be able to give something very specific. So I don't think we'll see quite the same effect as GDPR, but watch this space. But it's also important to bear in mind that even if right now there's kind of no standards out there, they are coming and you will be beholden to them. So it's worth bearing in mind. And with that, this just made me laugh. Like, did you notice for those security people, zero trust people are now becoming AI experts? It's the thing. I think so anyway. If you want to go read some more stuff, Microsoft did a whole responsible AI framework thing. We have a privacy and security bit. I realize that most of industry doesn't see privacy and security as part of responsible AI. They sort of have it as a separate issue, but we do have a lot of material on it. Again, it's not necessarily Microsoft specific, so if you're not using Azure, it's still useful to go and read. And then remember, security for AI, changing all the time. I will probably give this talk in a month, and I'll probably have to change half the slides, knowing what things are like. But there are things that we can do. Just remember, an AI system is still essentially an application that's calling down to an AI platform. And so if you treat it like an application from a security controls perspective and get those base security controls right, it's probably the best thing that you can do right now. And I'm going to leave it there. That's a QR code. It's not a dodgy QR code, because everyone says that when it's a security talk. It's just an easier way to send links to some of the useful things on there. There's a couple of Microsoft things. There's the book that I've definitely not on commission for, unfortunately. NIST, literally 2 days ago, released a white paper about standardizing the terminology for adversarial machine learning. I added that link just this morning. I'll hang around here. I've got a ton of stickers. Like, even if you just came for the stickers, I'm cool. I'll hang around here, come and ask me questions. I know, finished a little bit early, not too early actually, but hopefully you found this interesting. It's a little bit of my soapbox at the moment, that I think we're losing focus on the things that we need to from a security perspective with AI. We need to focus on the basics still, so don't lose sight of that. Thank you very much. Hopefully this talk was helpful, and yeah, have a good rest of your NDC as well.